Welcome to Soft Bulk December. I'm Zak Foster, and we're joined today with Laura Preston of Vasalando Quilts. Wave, Laura.
Hi.
We got a special hour or so lined up for you. Heidi, you want to tell them what we're going to start with?
We are going to start with some hand yoga.
And then we're going to talk about a hodgepodge of things going on in my life because it's the end of the year and it's just kind of wrapping up loose ends. You know what I'm talking about, Quilty Nook? Luke, what are you talking about?
Man, well, so I'm going to just be talking about quilts on beds. Interesting, sort of a new thing that I'm thinking about, which is, funny as a veteran quilt maker. So I just want to show kind of quilts in the world on beds, and as we kind of get into the season of gifting and making and showing and sharing and buying and selling, just to kind of put that in our brains.
I love that. I love that.
And
And
look at everybody. I'm interrupting you, but I just wanted to say howdy to everyone. Thanks for telling us where you're from. I'm seeing a lot of LAs, which I'm in now. Hello. I just showed up 2 days ago. Excited to see everyone. We have somebody from Europe, which is very fun, from the entirety of Europe, which I respect. Shout out.
Oh,
morning,
Rosa, it's
everyone.
wonderful to see you embroidering. Clayton, nice to see you eating. Lots of good
Hey,
things
Clayton.
happening here. We appreciate getting to see your faces.
Luke, I got to say, you're already looking a little bit sunnier and you haven't been in LA but 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. 2 days and I'm already, tanned and probably going to be starring in a feature film soon. Not really.
I'm ready
This is
for
what you
it.
do here, right? Isn't that what you
I'm
do in
ready.
LA?
All right. Well, should we begin with some quick little intros? We're changing up the order today. I'm going to be sharing first. So I suppose we'll introduce ourselves in that order. I'm Heidi Parkes. I'm coming to you from Milwaukee. We had our very first snow today, and it's beautiful to see that dusting outside. I make quilts mostly by hand. I also mend clothing and teach quilting, exhibit quilts, and yeah, so excited to be talking to everyone today. Zak?
My name is Zak Foster. I make modern quilts out of repurposed materials. I make a lot of memory quilts, specialize in burial quilts. And I'm also the organizer of the creative community known as the Quilting Nook. And I'm going to talk to you today about a brand new podcast adventure I've started, but I'll hold my horses for that. Luke?
I want to know more about this podcast. I'm very excited to hear about it. So Luke Haynes, newly moved to Los Angeles as of 2 days ago. I'm a quilt maker. Lots of kind of, I don't know, I'm transitioning, right? I was a pop art quilt maker for a while, and then I went into a reclaimed material quilt maker for a while. Now I'm going into a new strange world of quilts that are usable, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, but it's a real interesting transition, which feels like a regression in concept, to go from museum walls down to just like throw a quilt in the trunk. So that's kind of fun. So that's the transition I'm working on. And then we've got Laura Preston here, our VIP for the day.
Yeah, hi. I'm Laura Preston. I am here in San Marcos, Texas, halfway between Austin and San Antonio. It's been like 80 degrees here, so that's like Texas in the winter for you. And I am a quilter and designer, artist, entrepreneur, all of those fun things. And I started Vasalando Quilting, which is now Vasalando Studios, in 2015. And we make modern quilts, quilt coats, these wall quilts, all kinds of quilted things. And I work with a team of, I now work with a team of quilters who work from their home studios all around the country. So yeah, that's me.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Okay, I'm going to kick it off for us today with some hand yoga. So I'm just going to remove some spotlights, and then as maybe you could share in the chat, have you ever done hand yoga with me? You can write just yes or no. Be familiar with hand yoga. I know Laura is, and I was really excited to, oh, I see so many yeses. That's wonderful. So the last time that I saw Laura was in person at QuiltCon, and she was a student in my yoga class. And I've thought about a lot of different things connected to Laura since then, but getting ready to see your face live was reminding me of that. And it felt really appropriate to share a little bit about yoga with everyone. I think of Laura as another extremely savvy businesswoman, as we've been talking about business strategy. And I was re-listening to some of your podcast interviews that you've done also, and you talked about yoga so prominently, and it made me think as well that yoga is a really important part of my business strategy and ability to be productive and to make a lot of things quickly. So in that same continued spirit of our conversations with Maura and Roderick, I am very excited to share about hand yoga. As we do these movements, think about if there's just one really simple thing, whatever movement we get to, that feels particularly good. A great way to begin a hand yoga practice is not necessarily to do a whole sequence on your own, but just to pick one little simple thing that you can add into your daily routine. So consider that. And we'll begin with palm to palm at our heart space. We can begin to feel into some of the natural magnetism between our hands. And we can begin to flex side to side. So depending on what you do, you might start to really feel that in your wrist. You're welcome to hold on one side to feel into your intuition of what feels good here. I like to keep my elbows shoulder distance apart, but if it feels good for you to send them wider or closer together, you can do that. We'll return to center. And now we'll flex forward and back. We'll return to center. And we'll twist side to side. We'll return to center. And now we'll expand the space between our palms while keeping our fingertips connected. This is a beautiful one to sync with our breath, to expand with your inhale, and then to return with the exhale. We'll return palm to palm. We'll take what I would consider the opposite of that movement. We'll keep palms connected and spread the fingers wide. And this again, if it feels good to connect with your breath, you can. If it feels good to just move intuitively, that also is a wonderful choice. I find as I work into improvisation that hand yoga and doing certain movements that allow for a little bit of choice, a little bit of tapping into intuition, can help begin and spark some of that creative side for me. We'll return to center. And now we'll interlace our fingers. And then I've got my left baby finger on the back. We'll just take the opposite. So now my right baby finger is on the back. And we can alternate between the two. It's wonderful for opening up the joints. And we'll return palm to palm. Can massage the hands together. We'll gently place our palms over our eyelids. You can feel some of the warmth from our hands or the cool, whichever temperature, radiating towards the eyelids. We'll gently run our hands over our face and then land with palms over our ears. We'll run our hands over our throat and land again with palm to palm at the heart. We can release our hands down. We can blink our eyes open. I love that sequence because things seem to flow very naturally from one to the other. I get to experience that extended connection between the sides of my hands. And in the yoga philosophy that I've learned, the connecting the hands in that way is also really wonderful for connecting the two sides of the brain, the left side and the right side. I find quilting to be an extraordinarily dual side of the brain art form. There's so much connected to math and measuring. I find a lot of my students, especially when I go to guilds, have expertise with numbers and spreadsheets, and that also there's incredible creativity connected to quilt making. And so it's able to strengthen and make great use of both sides of the brain, and we can start to tap into that more by connecting the hands to one another. I have gotten excited about yoga for a lot of reasons. I came to it in 2008 and am a certified yoga instructor and yoga therapist. Yoga, so much of it is about being in the present moment, being more aware of how I move my body, of what I routinely do with my body. I have a mended tunic here that's about 5 years old, and I think I'm coming to terms with the idea that it might be time to retire it, which is super sad for me because I love this shirt so much. I've mended it many times though, and I think now it's been mended so much in the armpit area that it's a little bit tighter than I want it to be. So you can see it's really mended a lot, and I'm going to be teaching a mending class in February with the Makery, but it's hard for me to come to terms with stopping mending something, even though it would have otherwise been unwearable years ago. The mending gave it a lot of extra life, but one of the things that I find connected to mending and yoga is the way that it heightens my attention to how I move and the things that I routinely do, the things that are habits. It can help me become more awake to what my habits are, the way that my clothing wears out, whether it's differently on my right arm or my left arm, whether it's on the tops of my legs. What causes that? I think it's because I bend my knees a lot. Even as I'm sitting here with all of you, I'm sitting cross-legged on my chair. The ability to sit cross-legged when I bought this new pivoty, non-squeaky chair was a really big priority for me as I was choosing it. So I know that I like to bend my knees all the way frequently. And I know that because partly because of my clothes and the way that I've mended them. So body awareness, the way that I move my body and care for it, is something really important to me as a maker and a creative person as well. I think a lot about how do I routinely move my hands? What do I physically do on repeat a lot? When I first started quilting, I wasn't wearing any kind of a gripping thimble. I had a pushing thimble that I used to push the needle through, but then when I would pull the needle on the other side of the thread, I didn't have anything for that. My finger, my index and my thumb would be really raw and sore. And so then I started to wear a Band-Aid to take care of that. And then luckily I traveled to Seoul in South Korea and found a rubber gripper. And that changed my life. And then I came back to America and I wanted to buy more of them. I thought surely they were here, and they were not here yet. So I pestered Clover Japan to start doing what I pestered Clover USA to catch up with Clover Japan and some of the other companies. There's my favorite gripper is now sold from Little House, which is a Japanese company, through Snuggly Monkey. So like wearing this kind of gripper protects me so that I don't have to wear Band-Aid all the time. And that sort of repeated movement consistently on and on, making things and doing the same type of movement is really helpful for me and an important practice. I am thinking especially about habits right now, because on Monday I'm turning 39, be my birthday. And also, of course, the new year is coming, and it's a moment of sitting down and thinking about, what do I repeatedly do? What do I want to repeatedly do? If there are any habits that I want to incorporate into my daily routine. I have a habits lecture that's on my website that you can purchase and download. It's on sale for 25% off right now. So if you're interested in habits and thinking about some routines that you may want to enact or adjust, that could be a really wonderful resource for you. I talk about the way that objects can be helpful in your routine. And I have these beautiful tiny quilts from my friend Zak Foster that I've collected over the years. And I keep these in my kitchen, and they remind me about my creative community and my friend and the support that I have. I also have different hand yoga tools like this Marma stick, and I've got YouTube videos that teach you how to use this tool, but I have a couple of them, and when I see it, it reminds me to use it, and then I take care of my hands more often because of that physical object. My very last note is unrelated perhaps to habits, but maybe very related. I have this quilt coat that I made years ago, maybe 3 years ago at least, because of the pandemic, maybe even 4 years. Anyways, it's on the cusp of that trend in a class with my friend Mary Sue Fenner, but it was based on a pattern, and I thought I would like it. I tried it on in paper, like paper that was pinned together, and it felt good, but it doesn't feel good to me to wear it now. It's kind of bulky in the wrong places and tight in other wrong places. But I was excited to share with Laura that I have a hand-pieced, hand-quilted, hand everything quilt coat that I wish I could wear that I don't. And yeah, that's hopefully we'll talk a little bit more later about habits and yoga and how that's part of having a savvy business strategy and keeping you on your toes. Over to Zak. You're muted, Zak. Talking about habitual phrases.
Sorry. The sweetie was like popping soda cans and stuff like that. And I'm like, nobody needs to hear that mess.
Oh.
I was just going to say, make sure you read the chat, because there's a lot of thank yous in there for that hand yoga practice you just gave us.
Wonderful.
And you know that you asked us to look for a certain move. And for me, it was this one this time. That I guess with all these little tiny quilts I've been sewing lately, that there's something about my wrist now that feel a little tight. And I hadn't realized that until I started doing these flexes. So thank you for that little gift right there.
To be like the canary in the coal mine, if you're starting to get carpal tunneling when maybe this feels intense, or like this is the moment where you find out, oh yeah, I should be paying more attention. So that's wonderful to hear that you had that experience with the twist this time around.
Well, we got to take care of our tools.
Sure
right?
do.
That's right. Well, let me throw up a couple pictures. Like I said, I got a hodgepodge for y'all today. I hope you don't mind, but I'm thinking of 2021 wrapping up. And there's some business to attend to. There's some things I got to handle, because recently I just, as many of you know, got my very first artist residency down at John C. Campbell in North Carolina. It's a folk school after the Danish tradition. Thank you. And I'll be down there for 4 months, 4 long, dark winter months, but I'm so excited. So I'm trying to think about how do I get my house in order before I go down there for a little bit and come back? So one of the things that I'm excited about come up very soon, actually next week, next Wednesday, is a collaboration project with my friend Laura Hartrick. She's going to be part of the Visiting Artist series on the Quilting Nook. And speaking of goals, Heidi, Laura has been tracking her goals in the form of a quilt since 2014. And so she tracks goals, habits, routines. She just loves data. And she takes that data, and I'll show you some pictures of her work, and visualizes it in the form of a quilt. Okay? So here are some of her mini quilts. And what's fascinating to me is they all look so different. But if you know the mind of the maker, you get a sense of how this actually does track something. So she's going to come talk to us next week in the Quilting Nook. If you're interested, there's ways to get you the link. We'll figure that out after the show. But that's next Wednesday. I have started, and it's kind of on the quiet side still. So let's just keep this between the 61 of us, huh? But I've started a podcast. It's been a bit of a Tinder project because I've been thinking about it for a long time. It's finally, now I have the time. Now that I am, 9 weeks retired, 10 weeks retired from being a high school Spanish teacher, I got time to do little things like this. And so Seam Side is a dream that I've had about exploring the inner work of textiles. Seam side being a reference of the backside of a piece of patchwork. Y'all know that. And so the premise would be I sit down for an hour with a textile artist and we just talk about the ways that textiles have changed us as humans. Like, how come we're more human because we're working with this particular material? And it is a podcast / zine combo. And the first podcast is already secretly posted. So if you're a podcast person and you're like on Apple or Google or the one, Spotify, you can find it by searching Seam Side or my name. Soon and very soon, there's going to be an accompanying zine, and you can see my guest there, Emma Freeman. Wonderful illustration by an Italian illustrator, Claudia Mastrini, who I've been working with on this series. And the zine contains highlights of the conversation with some further reflections and questions for your own journaling or reflection. So that's coming down the pipe. I probably won't announce it widely for another couple of weeks, but you're here, so I want to share it with you. I have been doing, as you know, lots of tiny quilts. And I think the reason is, here's some I'm working on one right now. And I think it's because at the end of the day, I've been thinking so much all day long, and my self-employed people, y'all know where I'm coming from with this. I mean, Luke, we were just talking about decision fatigue, right? I'm like, I just can't think in words anymore. So for the hour that I would normally spend reading in bed or maybe doing a crossword puzzle, for me now it's turned into a time of hand sewing, usually on the couch, most recently in front of the Christmas tree. And I just make these little one-sitting quilts. And it's such a joy to be able to start and finish something in an intuitive way. I'm not making any big decisions. It's just, oh, those colors are pretty. Let's throw them together. They're all a little bit different. Sometimes I leave raw edges, as you can see there. Sometimes I darn them down, as you can see on the one on the right. Sometimes it's applique, most times it's piece. And it's just a fun chance. These were both inspired by the Nutcracker, especially the one on the left. You can see those luxe fabrics being kind of a nutcrackery palette. And it's just been a lot of fun because you can do them quickly and you don't have to commit. So it's like, if I want to work with some crazy colors, I can do that and then just be done with it. I don't have to commit to a whole quilt. I'm showing you two here because I can't decide which way I like better, which way is top, left or right. You want to tell me in the chat what you think? What seems most natural to you? One thing I was experimenting with on this particular quilt, as you can tell, is a two-tone binding. So there's that field of neon mustard at the top or the bottom. And I put a darker border around to try to show that. Let's see what folks are thinking. Oh, somebody do a quick count for me. Left, 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 right, right, left, right, left.
Me and Luke
right,
are both left, and Laura.
It's quick guess looks like left. Okay, that's the way left feels settled.
Kathy and Clayton and Melissa, Claire, they say right.
Okay, see? And that's the beauty. There's quilting tent's a big tent. There's room for everybody. Linda Doherty, though, I think I agree with you that the left somehow feels settled. Like if I'm reading it like a book, I'm reading it top to bottom, and then I get to this nice little reservoir at the bottom that I can hang out in. All right. Thanks for your input. And then last but not least, I just put this here as a note because, and we can stop the screen share now. One of my dreams in the back of my brain, I want to organize a quilting bee, like a real live IRL, physical, not virtual, not digital quilting bee. And I'm thinking about doing it as part of my artist residency down at John C. Campbell. So if you now or you in the future listening have helped organize a real live quilting bee, I want to talk to you. So could you contact me somehow? Let's chat. Has anybody here ever organized a quilting bee in the audience or on the panel?
I've attended one, and I feel ashamed that I cannot remember the name of the artist who did it because she's very famous. I recently saw her art at the Whitney Museum. I think it's Marie or Maria something. I will look into that and let you know, Zach. Maybe she can be our shout out person in the.
I think it's so funny. And Luke, this goes back to one of our earliest conversations that you and I had about how we have this cultural inherited notion of quilting as being this communal experience, the quilting bee being almost cliche, right? But now quilting is so much done by the individual from start to finish. And so I want to tap back into that somehow. And so that's what I'm thinking about. I mean, I'm working at this folk school. It seems like a quilting bee, a real live one, is a good chance to do that. So if you know anything about it, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. And that said, folks, that's the end of my hodgepodge. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time. Do I need to do something?
Oh, it's over to me. All right, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime, tomorrow morning, depending on where you are. Actually, I'm going to share a screen, and where are we? No, it's not showing me. So I'm going to share a screen because, and it's going to be a little bit in the conversation that Zach was having, just that the conversation of kind of people and making and the engagement with the object, right? So Zach's talking about the engagement with the making, and I want to talk about the engagement with the kind of the object afterwards. Now, why is it not letting me share my keynote, y'all? I'm trying to make a keynote here. Let me try it again.
Keynote, that's your first problem, Luke.
Well, look. Yeah. I feel you. All right.
If Zach hosted and that's why he was able to do the record that Heidi couldn't, maybe he has to give you permission.
No, I'm the host and I have made everybody a co-host. Let me just.
Yeah, so usually it works just fine. Well, guys, you know what? I'm not trying to make everyone watch me do it. Look, this hasn't happened before.
Luke, try one more time.
Okay, let me try it again. Okay, all right.
I'm the host
now. Okay.
From co-host to host.
There we go. All right, look, I'm okay, here we go. Share screen. What you know, you think I'd have this figured out by now? No, don't even share.
This is only episode 10.
I know, right? What an embarrassment. Look, and now, okay, we'll probably fine. Can you guys see my little keynote?
Oh boy.
Wait.
Oh boy. Okay. Technology. Look, it's a good thing I make quilts and I'm not trying to, you know, code computers. So again, the transition and sort of the thing that I was, my theme with what I wanted to share today is sort of hodgepodgey too, but I wanted to talk about, you know, quilts as objects. And again, talking about sort of the thing that Zach mentioned, this idea that, you know, Zach talking about community of makers. I wanted to talk about kind of the micro community, but still the community of user, right? So someone makes an object and then what does that object become, right? And so the world of quilting and a lot of the people who are super active in quilting and necessarily so want to sell the objects and have to really work to explain quilts as art objects so that they can get enough money for it, right? Like people don't understand that people who aren't quilters, I should say, kind of don't give the right amount of credence to the work and material, et cetera, that goes into a quilt. So we all have to kind of work on educating, and it's pretty fun and interesting to talk to people about where quilts come from and why it's interesting and why it's taken me 100 to 1,000 hours to make this thing and why I should get paid for it, et cetera. And so what that then does is quilts become really valuable and more interesting. And so then they're hidden, right? They're not used. They're not necessarily kind of put into practice, into space as much. And so I just wanted to kind of a slideshow of quilts on beds and just sort of talk about what that means to put a $5,000 quilt, $10,000 quilt on a bed and put it in your suitcase and travel. You know, here's me in London, brought this quilt with me for that travel. And, you know, here's another quilt actually that's in Milwaukee. That's in Milwaukee. There's a fun little kind of, it's like a hotel that's part of a bakery. But so each, you know, and these are all quilts that have come with me on travels and, you know, then into private / public spaces, so hotels, Airbnbs, or whatever. And I think it's just an interesting conversation about the utility that actually is part of a quilt, and like really in that soft bulk conversation, right? Like this is just a big tie back to where we started, but you know, the utility implicit in these objects in a way that I think is really interesting and potentially under engaged and kind of, you know, thought about, like, what does it mean? What does it mean to put the quilt on the bed as an act of displaying, right? Less people see it, just necessarily, right? Less people are sort of trundling through your bedroom or your, you know, your sleeping space. I mean, if nothing else, just because they'll wake you up at night, but like also there's some privacy and some safety or whatever. But it still is an active display, and I think that's pretty interesting. And you know, what does it do to the space? What does it do to the room? What does it do to you know, the kind of conversation between environment and the object of quilts? You know, here is a spot in Jamaica, in this cool little spot overlooking the ocean. So the blue really matched in a really interesting way. Here is, you know, Nicole's mom's house. I brought a quilt with me there for her little rickety bed from the 40s. Her grandmother's mattress, that's a whole nother conversation. Nicole's mom's grandma. So that mattress came with the bed from the, I think, 40s. Anyway, not very comfy, but having a quilt there, you know, gave me some comfort and some kind of ownership of the environment. And I thought that's really, really interesting. You know, and I don't really have a lot of pronouncements for my little slideshow, as much as just starting conversations about what it means to engage with an object of a very particular scale in a very particular way. And quilts are for kind of warmth. And that could be bed, that can be couch, that can be picnic, that can be all these sort of things, but it becomes almost a intimate conversation with its utility. And we, as a kind of different culture of makers and showers, are taking these kind of intimate objects and putting them in a public sphere, you know, sharing them on Instagram, selling them, exhibiting them. And so the kind of dialogue between function and view and this, I think, is one that's really ripe for conversation. You know, and again, just kind of tying it all back to this soft bulk idea. Here's one in Marrakesh that I brought with me to Africa. You know, again, just the conversation between environment and quilts and sort of, you know, does it add to it? Does it detract from it? Does it make it more like, am I kind of signing the room in a fourth dimensional sense? Like, my signature is this object I brought into a room that I exist in for a finite amount of time. You know, in this case, it was a week. So is this sort of my addition to the span of time of this room for mine? You know, normally you put your suitcase in and you leave your dirty clothes in the corner of your hotel room, but like adding the quilt to it actually sort of engages the space. And, you know, we do that all the time in our own space. And I just think that quilts are such beautiful signature pieces, to keep that metaphor alive, like a really sort of signing the room and I'm excited to talk to Laura about like selling these objects and kind of giving, her signature experience to people who buy it. And what does that mean in terms of the marketplace and commerce and how that works from a business perspective, but also just the idea of such a large composition, I guess, as a bed in a place, and putting something on top of that and kind of sharing it and showing it and changing the environment because of what you put in it. I think it's just a really it's a cool conversation, and I'll kind of stop with it there. I'm happy to obviously talk about it forever. So if people send me questions or whatever, either here or into the future.
Colleen asked, when did you start traveling with your quilts?
Colleen, that's a really good question. It's probably been, I would say probably 8 years ago. I started traveling with them. First, sleep on the airplane to, from a really functional perspective, it's just like when you show up at a place and it's a cheap hotel because that's what I'm choosing to afford, they have those like weird cellophane blankets that just don't really do the job. So, I have my quilt with me and it makes it much more comfortable. So probably that kind of 8 years range. And I've got another project to show you here right at the end. After I show you these cool pieces, this one was in Tulum. This was on the honeymoon. So this is a quilt I made for Nicole for the honeymoon. So here's a piece that I really want to show, and I think we've talked about it before, but it is a quilt designed to display on the bed. This is in a museum in Utica. And so the quilt is designed to kind of overlap this kind of art, pop art, portrait art with quilts, but only on the bed. So specifically for the size of a queen bed, it can only be displayed on a bed, but yet it sort of is an art, I think. Here, so there's an image of it from kind of displayed at the appropriate angle. And so the quilt itself is, it looks like this on the wall. And so it's this conversation about quilts as objects in the sense that it has to be displayed as a quilt on a bed in order for you to kind of see the image of it pop out. So it's this conversation that I'm trying to kind of figure out about pushing the edges of how you display and engage in art. Like, does it become art only when you put it on the wall? Well, in the case of this particular object, like once you put it on the wall, you still don't see it as its sort of final form. So just kind of creating a bit of that conversation through objects and these anamorphic perspective. Again, not making much pronouncements today, but just kind of giving ideas, some of the stuff in the back of my brain as we go into kind of this commerce season and this season of like buying, selling, making functionally comfortable love objects that people can get, quilts, buy them from Laura, hire Zak, get Heidi to, like all of these kind of like things that we make on these vastly different scales all have this history of tactile experience in them. And I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful conversation that I just wanted to kind of put out there and sort of shove into our brains. And then that's that. And now I want to put it over to Laura, and Laura has asked us
Time out.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm just
I have
jumping right in.
I have
well,
not really a question, but just a perfectly timed statement. So I've been digging deep onto YouTube lately, looking for vintage Quilting Bee footage. And I found this archival video from the Ozarks early 80s of this Quilting Bee of a bunch of ladies in the living room of this, wood paneled house. And they get to talking about how they have, after the Quilting Bee, what they have, they call it a bed turning. Have you ever heard this term?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
Heidi, you've heard bed turning?
Oh yeah, me and Maura Grace did that on my hotel room at the last QuiltCon. She came over and I put a bunch of quilts on my bed and we looked at them all.
That's it. And so it's this idea of exposition of quilts in a domestic space on the bed, but it would be several people's quilts layered together, and then everybody crams back in this little bedroom. We can link to this video because it's a treat to watch. Everybody crams back in the bedroom, and that's where you experience the quilt. in the environment, on the bed.
Yeah, here in Chicago, I just had his name, the Roger Brown House, which is part of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. He passed away. He donated his home and his art collection to the museum. And there are multiple quilts on his bed that he had collected over time. So when you go and you get a private tour of the Roger Brown House, they flip through and like you get to see a redwork signature quilt and all the other quilts. And then you go to his closet and you see some seminal patchwork jackets, and an amazing spot if you are in the Chicago area to go see that. Make an appointment and get a tour. Bed turning. Luke, that was just so beautiful to see all those quilts on beds. It really is extraordinary to get to see them
Yeah.
that way.
Hey, thanks very much. It's fun to kind of look back because I've been doing it for so long and I just try to take a picture. I'd never really thought about that it becomes an album over time of my experience and all of these different places, you know, that I've been so fortunate to travel with quilting. Quilting has taken me there, and then I get to bring a quilt with me. So
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with seeing them on your Instagram feed, but it feels so different to see them just by themselves. That was really special.
I want to know how you pack a queen size quilt in a suitcase.
I don't. It just shove it under my arm. It's sort of it's like it becomes my my scarf, as it were, But I'm mostly a carry-on kind of. So I try not to do too much shoving in the suitcase, otherwise it won't fit in the upper.
Right. Just had to ask.
Well, Laura, we're so excited to hear from you now. And if you want to screen share, you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, actually what all of you guys talked about brought up a lot of things for me that I wanted to talk about, and then I can show my website and all of that good stuff. But I had made some notes. But so with Luke, like talking about like displaying quilts, like hanging on the wall versus being on a bed, that's something that I think about a lot because I make quilts for people's homes. And, I think about if it's going to be on one of their beds, if they're going to be hanging on a wall, and like taking into account the design of the quilt as how it's going to lay over, as how it's going to be three-dimensional, basically, where the design is going to hit on the corners, what's going to be on that vertical edge of the beds. It really changes kind of how you think about it in terms of like the design process. And that, when I started designing quilt coats in, I guess, 2019, that it kind of like took the quilt design to like a whole nother level, because you have to think about how a quilt is going to wrap around an arm or like be on, a collar or a pocket, thinking about how a quilt becomes three-dimensional. I don't know how much everyone considers that. And it was something I hadn't really considered until quilt coats became a thing. So that, I don't know, that just brought up a lot of like interesting things thinking about three-dimensional quilts as objects. And it's also been interesting for me to see how people, we've recently had multiple shows, markets, like holiday markets here in Austin. And it's been interesting to see how people are gravitating towards the quilt coats a lot more than they are the quilts, which in the past had not been the case. Like the quilts were the, stars of the show. They're, there's more designs, they're, more, they're art, you know, they're more of art to me. You know, a coat is wearable, it's utilitarian. But thinking about that difference between the difference between how people are interacting with it in their everyday lives. You know, quilts are very private. You know, it's something that's going to be in their homes, in their personal spaces. It's not something that's an outward display of who you are. You know, it's for you. And so it's been interesting to see how much more people, like, our coats have been crazy popular, which is still crazy to me. Like, it's wild. And I think it's because people can wear it out into the world, and people can see them out in the world in it, and it's an expression of themselves in a much more public way than a quilt on a bed. So it's just been interesting to see that, I don't know, that difference as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then Heidi was talking about habits, habits, and, you know, making, well, and Zak as well, talking about like the practice of, you know, making just a small thing that you can finish in a day that's very satisfying. And I made me realize how far I've gotten from doing anything like that. Just, you know, the pandemic and being, you know, just the world being crazy. I've personally had a huge creative block just the past year and a half. It's been, you know, it's been easy to keep running the business, but, you know, coming up with new ideas when the world feels like it's insane and turned upside down, it reminds me that that's a really important part of being a quilter and being an artist, is building those habits into your day and building a creative practice back into, you know, what otherwise for me is like a very, you know, business heavy, computer heavy day, week, you know, all that. So thank you for reminding me that making art is important. And then thinking, you know, Zak was talking about community and how quilting is, you know, it started out as this community activity and something that a lot of people do together, and how it's become more personal, which I think it's not a bad thing. But I, you know, with my business and how I've been able to grow it has been by bringing in other quilters who love quilting, they love making, and they, you know, even though we're all in different places, they all work from their home studios all around the country. We're all remote. I've only met one of them in person. But we talk every day, and, you know, we have regular FaceTime chats and happy hours, and, you know, creating that community around quilting is really powerful. You know, it's made me a better quilter, and I think you learn so much from other quilters and other people doing what you're doing. So
can I ask a question about this experience? I know you've got more talking points, but I wanted to kind of, you know, I'm on the panel, I can just shove in my own questions in the middle. Sorry, you could tell me to, you know, to get in line. I've been a maker a long time, and sometimes you make a show, you know, I made a show of 50 quilts, right? That's impossible to do for one person in a short amount of time. I had help, I hired help. I gave people money to make quilts with me, and boy, howdy, did some people tell me what for, you know, just how dare you get some help. And so, you know, my question for you is obviously, you know, filtered through my own experience, but like, Have you gotten any pushback on, so like there's this again, kind of what I was talking about earlier, this nebulous area of function and art, and you're either one or the other. Once it's function, maybe it's okay to have a lot of help, but when it's art, it's your name and you better have done every stitch of it, et cetera, et cetera. Have you come across people kind of saying, oh, you didn't make this, maybe I'm less interested, or like pushback in terms of any of that, telling you, that there's just like, oh, that's not how craft is done, or I don't know. Is this any part of your experience?
I haven't, which is kind of honestly surprising to me, because I started out, my first 3 years, I was doing everything myself, and but with that, there's a limit to what one person can do. With a show of 50 quilts, you can't make them all. And I'm honestly surprised that people have given you pushback, because like artists for centuries have had studios, like artist assistants. Like that is how the great art.
Da Vinci got his start.
Yes, exactly. Like that's how a lot of the great art was able to be made. It's like I understand some people might want the thing from the maker, but that at a certain point that comes at a premium, and it's just not, it's just not realistic when you get to a point where growth outweighs like what one person is capable of. So
I mean, it's interesting because it's sort of craft versus art. Like the world of capital A art, they don't care who made it as long as the signature is a name that they recognize and could resell at Sotheby's, right? Like totally done. Jeff Koons has never touched a paintbrush or a oxyacetylene torch in his life. $30 million, no problem. And so, but I think craft world is a lot about the hand of the maker in the object. Dale Chihuly is a glass blower. He doesn't touch his stuff, but like he's the sort of exception. On the other hand, mostly wood turners, glass blowers, quilters, furniture makers. Oh, you want that to be made by the maker itself, because there's a arc of skill that goes into making it that isn't necessarily the case for production art. And it's just really sort of an interesting thing. I fully agree with you. There's a history in the art world, but in the craft world, it's almost the opposite, right? The last touch is always done. Tiffany finished each lamp, right? Like, the whites on the shiny noses of the de Medici children were done by Da Vinci, right? Like these kind of like the artisan came, the last hand, was of the top maker in the period and in the pyramid. And I just, it's interesting to think about. Quilters don't have the background of art history, just because it's not necessary in quilting to have learned art history to make an amazing quilt. It's great to do it. I think everyone should, but it doesn't. The pedagogy of stuffy old paintings isn't the same as let me teach you how to make a comfort blanket, right? They're two different things, but I think there's a lot of beautiful overlap. Anyway, I'm with you there. I think it's interesting that it hasn't come up that much. Great.
If I can share too, I boy howdy is the right word for it. I sure do remember being so excited about your 50 quilts and being friends with Heather Kinnian in Chicago, who was getting paid to help make quilts, and just over the moon excited. Like I remember when she told me I'm making quilts for Luke, and just so excited to be doing that. And then the pushback that we had, and me, I shared with a lot of people, tried to tell the story that I got my start and got the courage to go to art school because I was an assistant to a ceramic artist. So in high school and in college for 7 years, I made pottery, sometimes start to finish, and then Lori would come and sign her name on it, and then I'd paint it and glaze it, and that's just how the art world works. And I felt so lucky to have that experience of working for someone, making stuff. She'd be upstairs on the computer figuring out how to go to the art shows and taking photographs and doing all the business, and I got to just have fun in her basement making things out of clay. And Luke, I know you also have a ceramics profile on Instagram and love working with pottery too. And like the difference between being a ceramics assistant and being a quilting assistant feels negligible to me, but one other story that I'm familiar with that I think is really interesting, and I should, on my wish list of people to have talk to us, Natalie Chanin is definitely among them. But I got to hear Natalie talk from Alabama Chanin at the Art Institute a few years ago at a student lecture. And she shared a lot about how when she first got started her business, having people help her sew things by hand, to mostly clothing, that the law came after her, and like she was in a very serious lawsuit, and she had to change the way that she structured paying her employees. It used to be maybe a flat rate per thing, or like she had a system for how she was paying them, and the government came in and said that is not allowed, it is not okay. And she's like, everyone involved in this feels really good about it, how can it not be legal? But they had to change it to the point that they make kits for the hand sewing, and then each hand sewer will place a bid, and they tell them like about what the bid should be, but to kind of sidestep the law, they have to do this weird bidding process, and then they can take them home and sew them at home. And it was just, I do not remember all the ins and outs, but I remember it being fascinating, and that it was just a cross to bear for her, such a hard time to be in that legal battle. And thank goodness she persevered.
I luckily have not had that happen yet, but now I'm a little nervous about it.
It's a good story to look into, but it's one of the few instances that I can think of when I think about what happened with Luke hiring people to make quilts. And so that was a social pushback, not at all a government legal pushback, but for Natalie, what she was doing just seemed amazing, to bring that kind of industry to Alabama, to be giving women something they could do at home, maybe while their baby's sleeping, that they can, pick up and put down. That's what I love about quilting so much compared to pottery, is you have to take the plastic off, you have to spray it down, you have to get your hands messy. Like the time between making and not making, there's a lot of transition time. Quilting, there's zero transition. Like your baby starts crying and wakes up, you can be there in a half a second. And it was working so well for the people that were involved, and yet there's a whole big fuss. So it's wonderful to hear that you're having a good experience with employees and figuring out a pay structure that works for everyone. And I love the idea of you guys getting together for happy hour.
Yeah, we have our holiday happy hour this Friday, actually. So it's been nice to get to know everyone, get everyone else to know everyone. It feels like an actual team.
How big is your team?
We have 6 quilters and seamstresses, and then we have a studio manager as well, and then me. So there's 8 of us. You brought up something that I thought was interesting with the with people getting upset about the artist and the maker. I wonder if transparency is an issue with that. Like if people think that they're getting something that was handmade from the artists themselves, as opposed to saying like, this wasn't made by me, it was designed by me, and someone else made it. I don't know. But I've always tried to be very transparent about who makes it, and honestly, the quilters that I work with are better quilters than I am, so it works out for everyone, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, so mine weren't even for sale, and I got pushed back. Mine weren't even, it wasn't that somebody was buying a thing and was confused. They were just on a wall for them to look at, and they told me what for.
That's outrageous.
Yeah.
There's always somebody who knows better.
Yeah.
Whether it's actual better or not.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, so Laura, I am interested in sort of the second tier of the as you're sort of transitioning, you say transparency. One of the things we had talked about before we invited all of our teammates to come and watch us was maybe showing your website and giving us kind of a tour through the back end and sort of saying, here's how I sell. And like, you know, obviously all the objects are beautiful. So we want, look, let's show them anyway.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's cool to like maybe talk us through the experience of, you know, the selling and the website and, you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot about that part. Let me share my screen. Hopefully. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my website. Welcome. We rebranded earlier this year after 6 years of having the same branding. Like, you know, the business has changed a lot. So it's been, you know, I wanted something that was actually representative of what we're doing now, which is working with a team and, you know, making these handmade quilts for people's homes. So, like I said, we sell, well, I can just scroll briefly through the homepage. One of the kind of reasons I started Vasalando, or one of the things that keeps coming up as I've been doing this for the past almost 7 years. People come up to me all the time and they're like, I have this quilt that my grandmother made. I love it. It's beautiful. It's sitting in my closet. I don't use it. I don't ever look at it. So like, thank you for making quilts that have a modern aesthetic that actually, you know, look like they belong in the home that I've created for myself. And so, I mean, it's so sad to me that people like have quilts in their closets that they're not like using and loving and, you know, as like part of like the fabric of their home, but creating these like heirloom quality quilts with a modern aesthetic that, you know, will maybe in 50 years be something, hopefully not that people are putting in their closets. But yeah, I mean, that hearing those stories is very heartwarming, and it makes what we're doing feel very good, very satisfying. So if you guys don't know the story of Vasalando, I started the business in my Airstream studio. I started traveling around the country in 2013 in a 34-foot Airstream with my then boyfriend, now husband. I painted for a long time and then brought all my painting supplies with me and quickly realized that large scale oil paintings and tiny spaces just like don't go together. So I was looking for an outlet, like a creative outlet that could also be useful once it was finished. So I came across Mora's work, Folk Fibers, and Courtney Heimerl.
Yeah, she's in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Oh, I love her work. I'm so sad that she's not making as regularly as she was. But yeah, I found these modern quilters. I was like, oh my gosh, like you can make a painting with a quilt. So I taught myself, and about a year later started Vasalando and made quilts in a 200 square foot space for 6 years. And now I don't live in that Airstream anymore and have a space, which is nice. But I'll show you guys some of the quilts that we make, if my internet cooperates. So I release collections about once a year that are all inspired by places that I visited. There's collections inspired by the Pacific Northwest, by Thailand, by Antwerp, not Antwerp, by like Belgium and the Netherlands, that region. This is all from the Balance collection, which was inspired by like the high deserts of California and West Texas. Yeah. These are the Thailand collection pieces. We just launched oh, sorry, what was?
Just the way that you have two hands. I mean, they're just so beautiful. And it was too much. I couldn't.
Some of these are doubles. We launched a ready to ship section today of our shop. We had lots of leftovers from our markets. So, and then I can show you the quilt coats. So this is the original style. It's longer. It has two giant pockets. It's like very much like wearing a quilt, which I love.
I love the reel of you putting your computer, your water bottle, like everything in your pocket.
They're huge. They're huge. And then we recently made a chore coat, a quilted chore coat, which is what I'm wearing. It's my new favorite. And yeah. I'm not going to go through every page, but I can.
Your fanny pack was on my birthday list. I don't know if anyone got it for me before it sold out, but like, if you have a fanny pack to show.
I do. I do. They're sold out.
No.
They were very, very fun. Well,
and the gold hardware is so beautiful on them.
Yeah, that buckle is heavy in a good way.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna be making more of those. People clearly enjoy them. So.
Well, then maybe I wonder if you could go to the About page, because I think you so beautifully showed the photos of the people who you work with and told your story. And your husband's photography is just out of this world.
Yes. So my husband takes all of our photos. He went to school for photography and has a background in commercial photography. So I'm very lucky to have him around for all of our photography needs. But yeah, beautiful, useful objects is kind of where we landed for what we do. I love quilts. I love making quilts. I love textiles, but I'd love to eventually bring in non-textile objects to Vasalando and grow that part as well. So about me a little bit.
And what would, Laura, if you don't mind, what would that look like? Non-fabric, non-textile pieces?
You know, I've thought a lot about like the objects in my childhood home that I think about as heirlooms and like things that I would want to inherit, you know, someday. And you know, it's like wooden bowls or ceramic mugs, or you know, like my grandfather was a tinsmith, and he made tin chandeliers, and you know, just it would be like celebrating, like working with other artisans and celebrating craft and craftsmanship and things that are going to last for a long time. Things that you're going to like fight over with your brothers and sisters about who gets to inherit it. Still, that's further down the road, but something that I've just been thinking about. But yeah, I like to think, I mean, the cottage industry is something that is a very interesting model to me, that kind of came up when I worked as a virtual assistant when I was traveling around the country, and it meant that I could travel full time and make a living, and I didn't have to be in a single place. A lot of my coworkers were stay-at-home moms or people who just didn't want to commute, people who lived rurally. So, getting to know them and getting to know how powerful it can be to work from home, how many opportunities that can provide, like continuing that on with Vasalando has been, is something that's very important to me. So, these are our wonderful seamstresses and quilters. Lindsay's been with us the longest. She joined us in early 2018. And then everyone else has been around for the last year or two. Yeah.
Well, we just got a question in the chat from Rosa. She's asking, number one, if the quilt coats come in different sizes, which I know they do because of your beautiful new launch, but also why the name Vasalando? I think Zak might have an idea of what that means in Spanish, but she's wondering.
Yeah, well, so our coats do come in sizes. We launched those earlier, or a few months ago. And Vasalando, so I know that it means different things to different people. The way that I came to it was in a John Steinbeck novel, Travels with Charlie, where John Steinbeck traveled around the United States in 1960 with his poodle in this truck camper that he built. And he talks about, he recounts his travels, the people that he met. And he talks about the word Vasalando in his book as someone who is going somewhere, but they don't know exactly where they're going or how they're going to get there, but they have a direction. And I read that book before I started traveling in our Airstream, and that word just it stuck with me. I was like that, it just really resonated with who I felt I was at, the ripe old age of 24. And yeah, when it came time to name the business, we were on the road, we were traveling, everything was inspired by travel. It just really felt right. But I do know that the more direct translation is someone who kind of jokes around, someone who likes to have fun. Zak, I don't know if I'd love to hear your interpretation of it. Oh, I think you're muted.
We had some background noise. No, Rosa said it really well in the chat, playing around, joking, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to take things too seriously, and we make quilts for a living. It's fun. I love color and bright, bold shapes, and so it works into it as well. But yeah, that's.
Oh, thank you. It's so fun to see it. It feels like going to your store, being on your website. It just has such a welcoming feeling and really gets the idea of what you're doing across.
Thanks. Yeah, there's lots more on there if anyone wants to browse around later. Yeah. I'm gonna stop share.
Laura, I'd be curious to know a little bit more about your design process. So how you go from idea and then how you share that with your team and how that gets produced.
Well, so for the most part, I start with a place that I traveled to that's like particularly inspiring, that I felt like really resonant with, I had a connection with it. And I'll go through, I take a lot of photos on my phone, and I'll go through all those photos and, pick out interesting colors, see what common colors keep coming out, like what kind of feels like the place. And finding like photos of shapes. Like I'm sure you guys all know this and have done it before, but like when something like stops you in your tracks and you're like, that's a quilt. I see it like finished. Snapping a photo of that and saving it for later. And then coming back to it and, picking out which elements can kind of turn into like distilled, simplified shapes. And I mean, a lot of the times, like with this most recent Thailand collection that came out in September, I designed the whole thing when I came back from that trip in January of 2019. And then it sat for a year and a half before I came back to it and like refined it and, chose fabric colors and actually sat down and like figured out what the construction was going to be. So, with making quilts that are more of like a commercial product that isn't like an art piece that you can sell for $5,000 or $10,000, being really mindful of like the simplification of the design and something that that I can write a pattern for, that I can then send to my quilters. So yeah, that's kind of how things go. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Do you write your own patterns?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't, it's not my favorite part of the process, but after writing a whole book, it's gotten a lot easier.
You got some good practice.
Yeah.
It seems like you are really skillful at like finding the balance between making something beautiful and handmade, but being careful about having it not take too long, making sure it can be reproduced by people who aren't you, and then also finding a price point that works for everyone involved, that works for your customer and for you and the people who are employed by you. And that I'd love to hear a little bit maybe more about that. I think also you recently, you have released some of your patterns and maybe did a kit as well with Rianne from the quilt, who we know from the MQG.
Yeah.
And the patterns that are in the book. So even, I guess I'm also curious, like, how do you know if a pattern is available for purchase? And which is kind of like what Natalie Chanin does too. She sells the patterns and the books and the finished or the kit.
Yeah.
All that.
Yeah, that's been a whole interesting thing as well. And that kind of came about when we did this rebrand. I started out as Vasalando quilting company. And I have a lot of quilters that follow my work, and a lot of them who assume that all of our patterns are for sale, which, is not a crazy thing to assume with the way that most, a lot of quilters do make a living selling patterns. And so during this rebrand, I decided to split Vasalando Studios and Simple Geometric Quilting, which is like our quilt, like education patterns book, all of that, because it just got to a point where people were asking, we were getting emails every day, or people were asking if we make this in the pattern. And while I have, I mean, a lot of the patterns that I have released are from the book, and are old, retired quilt designs from years ago. And I'd love to do more of that in the future, but it's been so, Vasalando Studios takes up most all of my time.
Yeah.
So finding the time to write patterns and write blog posts and, teaching is just not, that's an entire job. Like that's a whole thing. And I really love making things and designing things. I don't know if I'd be the best teacher. So I would love to eventually turn more of our old quilt designs into patterns, but not today.
Yeah.
You gotta save something for 2022.
Yeah. Heidi, what was the other part of your question?
I guess like just finding the balance between the price point and the people who work for you and your customers and the design. I feel like your quilt coats are so perfectly priced. Like you can tell when you buy them, it's an investment. You're getting an heirloom item that matters. Thinking about them compared to like what is a Calvin Klein coat, like the fancy, the high-end coat versus like if I go to the Calvin Klein outlet mall, how much is a coat? And like just riding that line. And also, especially with you having just sold so many things in person, sometimes customers are awesome and other times it's like, wow, you really just like hurt me a little the way you were like muttering to yourself about the price of the thing in my booth. Like how just I'm curious about how you, especially because we've been talking a lot about pricing in soft bulk lately and how one arrives at dollars and money. You seem to do it really artfully.
Pricing is so hard. Pricing's a constant struggle, and especially when you're competing with people on Etsy who are selling quilts for $200, which is just not a realistic price for a queen size quilt. It's taken a long time and a lot of trial and error and a lot of just seeing what the market responds to kind of figure out where that right price point is, while also making sure that I'm paying my quilters appropriately and making a profit. It's like I want the business to be sustainable, and in order for that to happen, there has to be certain margins. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I have it figured out. I'm next year I'm like, oh, we've got to raise our prices. Mm-hmm. But it's a personal, there's a lot of personal roadblocks to get over with feeling comfortable with pricing your things at a certain point and figuring out who you're, who you're selling to, and what it is that you do. Like I watched the conversation that you guys had with Mara about pricing, and there's a difference between being a quilt artist and a quilt maker or a quilting business. And some people see a $5,000 price tag on a quilt and they think it's yes, of course it's art, but then you see people who $100 quilt at Target and they think that your $800 quilt is outrageous. So just finding finding the right people, finding the people who will value what you do, and who understand why it costs what it does, and educating people about that is also a big part of it. Because once they understand, then it doesn't matter what. I mean, it matters what it costs, but
I feel like the slow food movement has been a good trailblazer for that kind of conversation as well. Have you like paid attention to that, or felt an influence for like a roadmap of how to explain the pricing to people?
Not specifically with slow food, but that's a good analogy.
It's helpful. It's like, this is why this milk costs 3 times what the other milk costs. Like I find for myself, when animals are involved, I will pay more. Like I buy the best eggs at the store, and it's like a little microcosm of everyday action that helps me think about, what do I want to pay for clothing, or what are other things worth to me as well if I'm buying $6 eggs instead of $3 eggs.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that does go back to education and just explaining to people, all the steps that are involved, and the quality of the fabrics, and talking about the people who make them. It's like humanizing it and putting it into context with the alternative, which is it's with people making stuff in China and very, very poor labor conditions. Yeah. But I think, but you are a person who values that. Some people just, that's not their MO, and that's fine. They're not your people.
Right.
So finding the people who are willing to listen, and willing to change their habits is kind of key, I think.
Yeah, the way that I often put it is like, my job is actually, so I make quilts, but my job part of this entire endeavor is educating people why buying that quilt is a good idea, right? Like, making quilts is the fun part. That's easy. I'm gonna do it anyway secretly. But like, my job is educating people to buy those. The actual job part of all of this is the selling of the objects, and that's the filter through, educating people about the cost and value, et cetera. It seems to be kind of the job part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remembered my quilting bee reference, Marie Watt. Do you know about her yet, Zach? So I typed her Instagram into the link, and she will definitely be our extra heads up person. Although I talked about Natalie Chanin enough, we might need to link to her too. But her heading on her Instagram says, "My work seeks to make visible, repair, amplify, and celebrate Seneca and Indigenous knowledge through storytelling." And she engages in a lot of quilting bees. And I drove from Milwaukee back to Chicago to attend one of her quilting bees. And it was just a really, really beautiful experience to get to contribute to making her art with her. So she's definitely somebody to look up.
Sounds like you and I need a phone date.
We do. We desperately are overdue anyways, mister, but yes.
You and anybody else out there who knows something about quilting bees, hit me up. I want to talk to you. Want to plan a good one. Yeah. Speaking of business, y'all, I got a quilt to take to the post office. So I'm gonna have to get out of here.
I've got more boxes that I want to. Yeah. Same. I was just saying, I've got more boxes to unpack than I want to admit. So same.
Yeah, I've got 3 quilts I need to pack up and take to the post office today too. Today's got to be the day. Oh, it's
do it. I made this sitting here with y'all today.
Oh, just now.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I started it in cohort this morning. Made a
I was
couple
like,
patterns.
maybe I'll sew like Zach. This is literally, I sewed this one seam and I pinned this, and that's how much multitasking I can do during softball.
Yeah.
So.
All right, I'm going to the post office. Thank you for being
right.
here, Laura. It's been so nice to talk with you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Heidi. Thank you, Luke.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. So it's been so inspiring to watch your work and watch your business grow over the years, and just such a delight to get to talk to you today.
Thank you.
And thank all y'all out there too. I see your little faces.
Yeah.
I see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all take care.
Oh, thank you, everyone.